Welcome to another episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. Today, my guest is going to be broadcasting from an airport because we know that lots of people are busy and running around and going from place to place. So stay tuned for the next episode. Today, I am really excited to welcome Coco Brown to the show. Coco is the founder and CEO of Athena Alliance. Athena has helped thousands of leaders build their portfolio of impact and grow and advance in their executive careers. The company has also brought over 450 women to corporate boards, from growth stage private companies to name brand public companies. So I'm going to let Coco fill you in on the rest of her story. So welcome, Coco, to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Hopefully the Zoom noise canceling is working.
It sounds like it's working perfectly fine to me. So what airport are you in? Let's just start there.
I'm an SFO. I just arrived. It took a very, very early flight from the East Coast. So I've been up since 1 a.m. West Coast time.
Oh, fun. So, and I'm sure you have a full day planned ahead of you.
Yeah. Go right back to other things too. Yeah.
Right back to other things. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this journey of supporting women leaders.
Yeah. So it really started, I would say, back in 2005. And so that's a long time ago. It's over 20 years ago now. I actually was running a tech company called House, and the company's in the IT infrastructure space. So kind of deep infrastructure, servers and networks and databases. And it's a long story how I ended up there, but I ended up running the company. My title was president COO, but I was the one report to the CEO. So, essentially I was running the company, and I was non-technical. So I didn't have any kind of a technology degree. My degree's in psychology. Also, beyond that, at the time, quite young. So I was in my late 20s and then early 30s when I really kind of sunk my teeth into a top leadership role there, and then ultimately running the business. And then in addition, and I think the sort of wildest thing from my realization standpoint was that I was also, and still am, a woman. And I never thought about being a woman in my 20s. Like, I didn't think about it. Like, of course I thought about it, but I didn't think about it as being something that would hold me back at all in my 20s. I thought my age, like, that's what I was focused on. It's like, no one's going to take me seriously because I'm not in my 20s kind of thing. But I didn't really think that I would be held back in any way in my career because of my gender. I just didn't think about it. And then, in my early 30s, I started really feeling it, even though I was running this company and I'd achieved, I grew the company to over 54 million in revenue. It was acquired by IBM. Like, in my 30s and into my very early 40s, I did a lot, but I would walk into these super high powered rooms and it would be all men in these, decision-making environments with our customers, and all, technical and deeply technical, and talking about data center strategies and network redesigns and, DevOps and cloud, and a combination of the, voice in my head and the reactions around me made me realize that it was that I sort of had this trifecta of three things that were up against me. And so, you try to take them all down, right? Like, the youth, obviously, you grow out of that.
That kind of automatically goes away.
Yeah, that's the one you don't want to overcome, but whatever, it happens. But the other two, being a woman and being non-technical, I sort of combined those, and I met female CIOs who were our ultimate customer, and they'd say, "Oh, I'm the only one in the Valley," and I'd say, "There's Sunny Azaday and Marty Manacho and Peter Ray," and Sunny said, "Get us together, let's have dinner." Like, oh, good idea. So it really started with a dinner group that I started back in 2005. And we just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. It was like 8 to begin with. And by 2015, 10 years later, it was 150 some. And we were now beyond CIOs, we were CFOs and CMOs and the direct reports. And it was just this sort of community that we would get together and talk about data center strategies and network redesigns and, you know, and it kind of morphed over time into being Athena, that, which is a whole, like, I'm sure we'll get into that story.
Oh, absolutely. No, and I love that you said that, because I mean, I had a similar experience. I spent most of my career in IT, directing programming groups. I have an English major. So,
yeah.
Although I did take a couple of programming classes in college, so I wasn't completely, completely innocent of technology when I started. But, I found it was something I had an aptitude for. But still, it's really interesting to bring a non-technical brain, to your point, to a very technical environment. And I think there's actually advantages to that. Because
100%
see things from a different perspective, and it sounds like that's really what you and ultimately Athena are all about, seeing things from a different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. When I started at Taos, I was what was called a staff manager, and I used to say this is the most important role in the company, but nobody believed that, other than me and us, I guess. Because everybody else was like, oh, you're the consultant babysitters. And because it was a professional services model, so we were responsible for the consultants out in the field and kind of making sure they're successful, staying on assignment, get the performance reviews they need and all of this kind of stuff. And but it was from that function that I ultimately ended up running the company. So I think I was right in the end that it is the most important, but it was very much much more, every problem is a people problem at the end of the day.
Yes, 100%. And I agree with you.
Even AI problems today.
Even AI problems. Everything ends up being a people problem, because ultimately, even though, theoretically AI is going to take over the world, right now, AI is controlled by people.
And ultimately it's the people. We're at the root of, and also our fears about it are about what it means for people, our ethical and moral, and all of our issues around who's building the AI, the diversity of, that is all the people, like, it's all people problems. These are all people problems.
It is all people problems. So you built this group of women that you were networking with, that you were connecting due to your travels, right? And so how did that morph into, kind of where it is today?
Yeah. So in late 2015, I was invited by Yvonne Wassenaar, who's the then CIO of New Relic, to come have a discussion with Senator Mark Warner, who was out from Virginia doing kind of a hearts and minds tour of Silicon Valley. And the senator, we wanted to meet with like 25-ish, top tier women of leadership in the Valley. And so we sat around a table, like a giant boardroom table with the senator, and he said, "What's on your mind?" Someone said boardroom, and it just became this like, why aren't we in boards? And I thought, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about this problem because I was on Taos's board for 12 years and, didn't really consider that to be like such a pinnacle of experience for me. But at the same time, I was like, well, why wouldn't we be on boards? That doesn't make any sense. Like, what do you mean you're not on board? Like, and there are these women who, like top partners at law firms and top healthcare administrators. And so I was looking at it as like, well, you mean this isn't a tech problem? I thought it was like, because there's no women in tech, you don't see any women at the top. But it's like, even though you see half of the lawyers and half of the hospital, employees are women, they don't make it to the top. At the time, it was like, and I think it's not shifted a whole lot, but 14% of partners in law firms and also about 14% of hospital administrators are women. And it's like, what? Well, why is that? So I think, so I got a flurry of emails the next day saying, "That's it, Coco, go solve this problem. You have the ecosystem." And it was basically that. It's like, you've got this incredible ecosystem, binders and binders of women. Who said that? one of the bushes, I think. Anyway, it's like there is no pipeline problem. There's never been a pipeline problem. There's been an access problem and a bias problem and an overcoming problem. And so I got this flurry of emails and said that, kind of directed me in a way that I thought was a nonprofit, sort of thing. So I started a nonprofit, and then I collaborated with a number of people for what is our theory of change. We're talking about the last mile. What do we need to do? Well, it all comes down to access. It comes down to presentation, and it comes down to competing. And so we need to build programming around that addresses that. But in the process, we learned so much more, and we created a commercial company 3 years ago. So we've always been in the business of getting women to boards. It's just that it's actually so big, so much bigger than that. There's so much more.
So what are the top 3 impediments that you see in women getting to boards?
Well, in getting to boards, it's access. So in other words, the higher you go in any organization, no matter the role, the more it is about access, the more it is about your referral network, really. And it's particularly true with boards. Very few of them use recruiters, or a recruiting process. So it becomes all about who you know and who knows you, and are you in the right circles, in the right place at the right time, and all the stars have to align. So access is the number one. The number 2 is, how do you translate your incredible career, which you tend to think of in terms of a tower, a domain, sales, marketing, whatever. How do you translate that incredible career into you as an overarching steward of the business? Because as a board member, you don't come in and, steward a tower. You have to be able to engage in conversation around the finances, as well as the product strategy, as well as the threats around the corner and regulatory issues and things like that. So that's the second big one, is presentation. And then the third big one is competing to win. And, this is in part where I think women, we suffer from both the external view, right? Like the Rooney Rule doesn't work. If you have one diverse person, you're for sure not going to hire them because they look too much like an oddball outlier. So then you criticize them even more deeply. So, competing to win is harder when you're underrepresented. But the other thing is competing to win in your own head. Like one of the things that women get sort of dinged for is opting out. We don't raise our hand, or we don't, people offer us great promotions, but we don't take them because we think it's going to be so much more work or so much more responsibility. And it's like, don't do that to yourself. Go for it. You will figure it out. And so that sort of competing to win is a little bit about knowing your competitor and being ready to compete, and then knowing yourself and not getting in your own way.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring up the opting out piece, because I talked to a guest earlier that really talks about what she's seen as far as, women get to a certain point in their careers and then all of a sudden they are responsible for aging parents, maybe, their own and maybe their partners. And, they're just at that point of the career, and all of a sudden, well, I have all these other responsibilities. Maybe I'm in a financial position that I don't, I can take a step back, and they choose to do that versus leaning in and trying to manage all of that at the same time.
Well, actually, funny that you say that, because I'm just coming from being on the East Coast. I was in Austin during the big, storm last week. I had to be in Austin on Thursday night. Then I flew to Philadelphia on Friday so that I could speak at the Wharton reunion on Saturday. And then I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so I went to my dad's house, and I'm, sort of transitioning from my mom to my dad, who, they're divorced. So she drives me to his house, and there's that thing going on. They're both in their 80s, so then I'm cooking dinner for my dad that night, and then I'm cooking additional meals the next day. And then I talk, not to get into too much detail, but there's some stuff going on at the home front, including our kitchen being demolished tomorrow. But there's other stuff going on. And so I decided at the last minute, like between these two issues, I'm going to have to fly home early from visiting with and taking care of my dad so that I could be home for this other thing at family. So I literally just changed my flight and got on a flight early this morning instead of tomorrow. Like, it changed it by one day. And these are the things we do, right? Like, this is it. But you also can opt out if you don't want to do that. Don't do that, right? Like, if you have the financial ability not to do that, you don't want to do that. I'm just saying, if you do want to do that, and the way I think about, and it's not that I want to be living a crazy, all over the place. It's that I started a company after the age of 50. I've raised angel investing. I've raised $2.5 million. I'm the steward of that money, and I'm building a company. And I have, and I also have kids who are teenagers and young adults, and I have a husband, and we have some health issues, and then we have a remodel, and then I'm on a board, and then I have parents in their 80s. And just the life I chose in that sense, right? And but the way I think about it, that the thing I want to free up for women is, if you really want it, don't go after a board seat or anything if it's just because everybody's telling you that's the next checkbox you're supposed to check off. Like, that's not the indicator of your value. So don't go after it if it's not right for you. If you do want it, be sure you want it, Like, I'll tangent for a second and then come back to this sort of wheel of like craziness. But a tangent for a second is that what I see after, and I'm not exaggerating, have talked to at least 3,000 executive women in the last 7 years, at least, like, personally, individual, different executive women. It's about 2 a day. And I know it's more than that. So, and what I've learned from them, first of all, we know that the average age of the female leader is 45. And what's happened to them by that point is they've been told they either opted out or they slowed down or they powered through and they feel ashamed of themselves. Like, in any one of those scenarios, you should feel bad about yourself, whether you opted out, slowed down, or powered through, right? But in addition to that, you didn't raise your hand, you got passed by, you waited to check too many boxes, and then if you were assertive, you were too aggressive, like all
those things. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then on top of it, and this is the one that I think is the saddest, is on top of it, we're made to feel we're running out of time. We're made to feel our time is now short. And if you think about the word retirement, first of all, it has the word tired in the middle of it, but it was institutionalized in 1935 it's been around for longer than that, but like really institutionalized with Social Security in 1935, when the life expectancy was 62. And not to say that we're all going to live past 62, but what I'm hearing for women is that they're saying, as long as my brain and my body are cooperating, why can't I have the freedom to be professionally relevant into my 60s and 70s? And if I did opt out, why can't I come back in? Why can't I have a career after 45, or 55 or 65? Yeah. Like, why can't I? And why can't I make money at it? Why does everything have to be about giving? Like, why can't I have some fun teaching or writing a book or doing a podcast or, serving on boards or being an advisor or starting a company and getting funding or coming in and out of operating roles because I only have to be there 3 years, or investing in the next generation of startups? Like, there's so much we can do, but we just sort of feel like we got to make a choice. Is it going to be the family or a career?
Yeah.
And it's just so unfair.
Yeah. And I love that. And it's so funny because and I talk to a lot of executive women too, from day to day, a lot in researching my books.
Yeah.
And what telling the stories, that's really my passion, is telling the stories of women leaders. And it's interesting because, I talked to someone the other day, I think she was late 40s. And she's like, I know my window is closing. Right. And but there's this perception. And I think part of it is, I know lots of women who, once they get in their 50s, are just worried about, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired now because I'm too old. Mm-hmm. They think I'm too old. I'm going to get pushed out. And there's men that experience this too. So I'm not saying this is only women, although I feel like women feel it a little bit more acutely, that this whole you're not worth anything after you're 55, that we have going on. And to your point, a lot of women and men are active and healthy into their 70s that are more than capable of working and contributing. And why do we say that, okay, well, they're on the slopes of retirement, so we're not going to hire them, we're not going to develop them, we're not going to put them on boards, we're not going to give them opportunities.
I don't know why we do. I think we get the choice to decide that that's not going to be the way that it is. That's what I do think, my world revolves around women, at least today, but ultimately I do want Athena to be for everyone. It's just we're starting with women because women need the competitive advantage. But I think one of the things that maybe, although I don't have any hard research around it, different for men versus women, is that the challenge for us, if we're both at 45, men or women, we've been beaten down so much all that time compared to our counterpart. And then also that's when we actually start often when we're more tuning in. We're like, okay, the kids are good, they're launched, or, I figured out how to take care of all the things in my life, even if I don't have kids. Like I sort of hit this stride, and then you also care a little less. You're maybe a little bit more able to go for it, and so there's all these sort of subtle things that then you feel like, wait, now I have to tune down. I don't want to.
No, yeah. I totally agree with that. And I do think women hit that stride. They start to come into their own in their late 40s. To your point, the kids are taken care of, or whatever's taken care of, or, we just go into a different phase of our lives where we're like, okay, now it's time for me to really use all my skills and talents. Now it's time for me to shine. And I am able to contribute on such a higher level at this point, even because I have the wisdom, I have the experience, I may have more free time than I've had in the past. And, I'm at a place where I'm really ready to put myself out there. And I think women have so many opportunities in this time in our lives. And I love supporting them in that. I love telling the stories of the women that say, yeah, I'm going to take the bull by the horn, so to speak, in this situation. So if you were, I know, you give advice all the time to women as far as they're developing, these things. Mm-hmm. What's the biggest piece of advice that you give to women in this situation when they're trying to do this?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we have to do is step away from a linear progression thinking about ourselves and move to a biographical view of ourselves and be able to think about ourselves a little bit more like a brand. And so then in that case, like, what is this brand? What is the product? And what it is the brand of the product, right? And free yourself from the identity markers that you have on a resume, which are, title, time, company, that sort of thing, and free yourself from that entirely. And the exercise I like to encourage us to do, and this is the same exercise, by the way, that I created for my kids when they were applying to college, is, okay, step away from the papers and the having to answer questions. Step away from it entirely. And here's a whole bunch of sticky notes. And now what I want you to do is I'm going to ask you questions. And every time an answer comes, you're going to write it on a sticky note. One answer per sticky note. Because you can't add up a whole bunch of things. So what have you lived through? So my son, he's like, okay, I lived through this. And he wrote it down. And this. And he wrote it down. And this. And what have you lived through? What have you experienced? What have you contributed? What have you been a part of? What drives you? Just all these questions that get them to just be pulling things out and oh yeah, when we were on that trip. And, one of the things I get so I can't understand about myself yet, but I think I should write it down is, why is it that I can't walk past somebody who's sitting on the street without, stopping and talking to them? that's in you. You know, like, and I love that characteristic. And it's one of the things in my son, and my daughter actually, but he was the one who wrote that one down. So they and then what we did was we took over the ship. Inside of the pantry, outside of the pantry, refrigerator, every cabinet, just stick them everywhere. Just stick them everywhere. And then you stand back and go, okay, are there anything organizing in this?
Yeah.
Well, those are all travel. And those are all my interest in psychology. And those are all, you know, and so we started organizing. Like, okay, so what does this tell you about your themes, your unique characteristics, your experiences? And it's in that sort of a way that you allow yourself to build a biographical view of yourself. Because if you sit down with a linear piece of paper, it just doesn't work, right?
I love that. And
telling like, yeah.
I have taken clients and myself through similar exercises. I haven't done the sticky notes all over the place, but that's fun. I like that idea. I may have to try that. But I think they're telling me, you know, let's take out, you know, get out of that linear titles view. I mean, we always view ourselves, or we're taught to view ourselves through when our titles, you know, I'm a CIO, I'm a this, I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a this, you know, we put labels on ourselves, and those labels do inform us of some things about ourselves, right? To your point, but what have we accomplished? What are we interested in? What do we love? What, you know, those things create such a bigger picture for ourselves and expand our identity and expand what's possible. And I think that's part of one of the things that corporations often do is they put us in these boxes, and then that almost reduces the possibilities, right? It reduces because we're like, okay, we're on this track and you've done these things, so you can't jump over here, even though your skill certainly could be transferable over here.
Well, one of the things that's actually really, really interesting, I host a monthly series. I don't call it a podcast because it's we call it a salon. We have everybody, kind of like a webinar, but everybody joins in, and you know, we're all on video, and but I interview a prominent CEO once a month, and I've interviewed the CEOs of Bank of America and Cardinal Health and MetLife and J. Crew and American Cancer Society, like all these incredible CEOs. And then I wrote up the report of the findings, and I can send you the link to it. One of the things that's really, really universally true with every CEO I've talked to, and is my own experience as a CEO, is that we take crazy assignments. So you don't get boxed in. Like, the people who end up at the top are the ones who do not let themselves get boxed in. They take a lateral move instead of a promotion. They forego the promotion so they can get this really great experience over here that will make them more valuable and round stuff out. They stop thinking about their resume much earlier. Yeah. And they might question, like, oh, I'm going to go from a VP title to a director title, but they do it anyway. I think it was it Libby Waddle who did that? Anyway, you do it anyway. No, it was Karen Peacock, who was the CEO of Intercom, which is this great software platform, who went from, I forget where she was like a VP to a director role and into it so that she could experience running product management, you know? So that sort of thing is also part of the whole process, is like, free yourself from judgment and build skill, you know, build experiences, build skills. And that will make you more viable into a later career if you want to.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that, because, you know, so many people tell you, you know, not to be a generalist, right? You know, that you're going to do better if you go deep. And my experience was, you know, the exact opposite of this. You know, I was an English major in college. People would ask me, well, what are you going to do with an English major? Are you going to teach? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to teach. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to do anything I want to do, because I can think, I can write, I can organize things. Yeah. I have the world is open to me. Ironically, I started my career as a trainer, right? But even that was a great way to start, because I was learning the company's products. I was learning the company's customers. You know, was an interface. And then throughout my career, I I agree with you. I took on so many different roles, like just crazy things that I had no necessarily background in, but I knew I could learn, right? And I think that's one of the things that people don't trust themselves, that they can learn. You don't have all the answers, and you can learn.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. And if you think about that, even on sort of like minor levels, like in our household, my husband tends to be the one that troubleshoots like mechanical issues. But if I sit down, like the dryer or the washing machine or whatever, right? But if I watch him and I watch what he's doing, I'm like, I could do that. Like he's just troubleshooting. He's looking up on. So this is just silly, but I was weed whacking the backyard, and I'm like, the weed whacker's not working. How do I get this thing off? And so I'm like, all right, I'm watch a few YouTube videos. And I didn't watch a few YouTube videos. I'm like, no, all of this, like my husband does all of the, it's super stereotypical, but it just happens to be the way we aligned things in our family. He does all the mechanical stuff, right? I'm like, I do this, it's like, and it's just and I'm not saying that as a male female thing. I'm saying it as like my own mental block. I so easily gave up on it. Like I can't do that stuff, and I so easily give up on it instead of just being like, I bet it's on YouTube. I just have to watch a few YouTube, and everything is out there to learn. My kids are teaching. My son taught himself how to play the piano through YouTube. And they're learning German through YouTube, and it's like that's I think one of the things that we have to think about in our older life is like, what are you going to do for the next 20, 30, 40 years, right? Like I'm 53. And as long as my brain and body cooperate, right? Like, what am I going to do into my 60s, into my 70s, into my 80s? My mom's in her 80s, and she's like, I wish I hadn't retired. Because she's still, her brain and her body works. And she's like, what am I doing? Like, I want to contribute in a professional way, not just a giving way, but in a professional way, right? So if we don't take that on and think about that, then we will atrophy and lose our abilities or our confidence, not our ability, but our confidence.
It's always, use it or lose it, right? I mean, it's just like our muscle tone. We lose our muscle tone if we don't work out and exercise them. And we lose our brain if we don't exercise it and, use it and learn new things. I mean, there's, everything you read says one of the best ways to prevent, Alzheimer's and dementia and some of those things is to learn new things as you get older. And I love that's part of, my journey. I decided at 55 that I was going to leave the corporate world and go out and try something, do something different. But I can't just sit around and do nothing, so I'm, learned how to write, and I'm writing books, and I learned how to do a podcast. And, there's so many things that we can do to just keep our interest in things. And I think that's really probably one of the things that helps me, and I know helps a lot of women, and even in growing your careers and getting on boards and being more of a leader, it's really that ability to say, okay, this is who I was yesterday, but I can be somebody new today and tomorrow, and I can learn new things and take on new skills, whatever my age.
I think it also starts with maybe letting go of the term retirement and thinking about the word rewirement. And then I think for younger people too, people who are just starting out their careers, I think about my kids are 19 and almost 23, and I say the same things to them that I'm saying to everybody else, older, is like, just build skills, build experiences, because we don't know how the world's going to shape from here. It's not like it was for our parents' generation, where it's like, you're going to be an accountant or a firefighter or a blah, 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 blah. Like, it just doesn't work like that any longer. And then the longevity is longer too. So,
yeah. And I mean, in a lot of ways, it's very freeing that it doesn't work that way any longer, because you never know what opportunities are going to pop up next. Now, if you're comfortable staying in the same lane all the time, then maybe that's not so exciting for you. Yeah. But I love changing lanes. So I'm always excited about new things, which is really fun. So 100%. So what's next for you?
So, we are, So Athena it's a digital platform where if you think about like the experience of a university, right, where you got frisbees thrown across the lawn, and there's majors and minors and labs and study groups and all sorts of affinity groups. We have all of that at Athena. But it's not physical. We do 80 in-person meetups every year, so we are doing a lot of in-person, but 90% of what we do is live digital. So it's, and also asynchronous digital. So it's courses and pathways and videos online and then there's community and all of that. So a big part of what's next for Athena is there's three major, or if you go into 2026, but three major product enhancements on our roadmap. So we're really focused about, sort of like what's going on with our product is one thing. The other big thing is shifting the mindset. So everything we've been talking about, getting our ecosystem today as women, but getting people past a linear view of themselves into a portfolio view. So what is your portfolio of impact? And how do you define that? And what is your spider diagram on that portfolio of impact? And where do you want it to be? And so thinking more holistically about yourself and broader and bigger, that's another big what's next. Like it's almost like we're sort of in that evangelizing phase where we're trying to get people to understand and be with us and have those aha moments. That's the other big thing. And then the third big thing is that we're raising money. So we're in the next big phase and looking to raise money. And we're doing it kind of quietly because honestly, I really most want it to come from women. So it's not sort of the traditional way of doing it. If anybody's interested, they can come talk to me.
I love that. I love that so much. That's really awesome. And yes, so tell everybody how they can get in touch with you if they're interested in investing or learning more or becoming involved in it.
Yeah. Well, so becoming involved in Athena or learning more about Athena on our website, which is AthenaAlliance.com. So 2 A's in the middle there, right? AthenaAlliance.com. And there you can learn about Athena, but you can also schedule time we see every single person that joins Athena as an individual snowflake. So they need to be onboarded and sort of create their own program. So we really encourage when you go to the website, choose to have a meeting with one of our consultants, our member consultants. As for me personally, I'm really easy to find on LinkedIn, first of all, and it would be great. Like my preference is reach out to me on LinkedIn and say that you heard me on this podcast. And, so that way I have a registry, right? But I'm also just Coco at AthenaAlliance.com. No A on the end of Coco, just COCO at AthenaAlliance.com.
I love that. And yes, I found you on LinkedIn. I love your presence on LinkedIn. It's really wonderful. So it's been great to talk to you today, Coco. I really appreciate you joining us from the airport, showing us a view from real life, which I love to share. We talked about this a little bit before, and it's awesome that you were able to fit us into your busy schedule, and I wish you all the best. If people want to learn more about me, my books, my ratings about women's leadership and women, I love to tell women's leader stories. You can check it out at daringtotranscend.com or on LinkedIn, Karen Ann Bulluck. So look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daring to Transcend.